Time for sound design. Today I'm going to record 3 quirky instruments and see what kind of sounds I can make with them in Ableton. The first instrument I'm going to use is the slide flute, which is basically a plastic tube with a slider that you can slide out, and with that you can change the pitch. So it sounds like this. The pitch is variable all the way. It's kind of a cheap odd thing, but let's see what we can make in Ableton. Just outside the camera view I have the Rode NTG4 mic. It's a shotgun mic. A sensitive mic can pick up very low volume sounds. So that's the one I'm going to use for recording. In Ableton I have a track set up, audio track, and let's go. So I recorded a few notes in Ableton. So it has this kind of airy quality to it, which I think is really nice. So let's put this sample into simpler and see what we can make with it. So first thing is to adjust the volume and add a little bit of gain here, and then adjust the start and end point. So when I'm sliding it, the pitch varies, so that's not very useful. But then here, I really like this short note. Let's see if we can work with that. It's not very stable in pitch, so maybe let's try to tune it to a C. So this is more or less a C. So especially when you play it 1 octave lower than the octave I recorded it in. So this is the original pitch. 1 octave lower. That sounds nice. And since this is a very short sound, I think with an arpeggiator this will work quite nicely. So, but first let me adjust the envelope. Well, that's fine actually. Okay, let's put an arpeggiator on this. MIDI effects, arpeggiator, 8 notes, style, up, down. Let's put in some notes. So this kind of works. It's a bit static, so we want to create a bit of modulation and also some delay and a bit of perhaps reverb to create a bit of more space and stereo spread. So the first effect I'm going to add is maybe a chorus. So without the chorus it sounds like this. With the chorus it sounds like this. Not a lot of difference, maybe a bit of reverb, just a hint of it. It's a nice start, but it's still a little bit too static, so I'm going to add a filter with some modulation of the filter frequency to create a bit more variation. So I'm going to add the auto filter, and then maybe in this case use a bandpass. And then use an LFO to modulate the filter frequency. This is way too fast, maybe on 6 and then not all the way, so maybe from 40 to 80%. So this is a nice way of modulating the filter frequency in a very subtle way. The next step to do is, as always, save all these devices and effects into an instrument rack so I can save it to my library of instruments. So I'm going to save this as slide flute arpeggio, ARP. So this is the first instrument, the slide flute. Here it was. This was the flute and the result. So that's a very usable sound. Okay, moving on to instrument number 2, and that is the Melodica. So this is also a wind instrument, you can say. You blow into this mouthpiece and then you can play on the keyboard. This is often used by the gorillas, for instance. It's a very quirky instrument. So let's record a few notes and see what we can make from this. So I recorded a few C notes, different lengths, different intensities. So I'm going to drop this one into Simpler and see what we can make from it. So since I used a short note for the slide flutes, let's go with a bit of a longer note for this one. Boost the volume a bit. It's not necessarily super pleasant. This is nice, it's a swell. Maybe the first long note that could work. So I adjust the start and end points. And this is the original pitch if I play it an octave lower. Or 2 octaves lower. That becomes interesting. So I'm just gonna adjust the tuning a little bit. I'm gonna loop this, so if I wanna play chords, just the attack time, start point and the fade amount. So this sounds like a pretty good loop. Let me get into the effects. And the first thing I want to do is some volume automation, basically a tremolo. So I'm going to use the LFO in Simpler, crank up the percentage on volume. Set this to an 8th note, maybe 50%. And I'm thinking some redux to make it a bit more lo-fi, so maybe 12-bit. And a rate at 12.5 kilohertz. And just put in some chords. And to create a bit more stereo spread, an auto pen at a very slow rate. And to make this sound a bit more dynamic, I'm going to add a saturator plus an LFO to modulate the drive of the saturator in a very subtle way, but just to create a little bit more dynamic to the sound. And I'm going to do that from 0 to a couple of dB. Maybe put the LFO from 50 to 55%. So 50 means basically 0. So that's the original value. 60s. And then set the rate of the LFO at 0.4 Hertz, so it is quite slowly moving. So yeah, that is it for the Melodica. So I used one long C note on the upper octave of the keyboard. It is a 2.5 octave keyboard. And then I created this from it. Moving on to the third instrument for this video, and that is the Kazoo. So it's this little super quirky instrument that basically, if you talk into it, it sounds like this. It sounds like this. So I'm not sure what I can make with this, but let's record something and try it. So yeah, that is weird. Let's go to Ableton and see what we can make from this. So I'll just put it into Simpler and start with it. I'm not sure if this can be a sampled instrument or just a loop. Let's start with this long part at the beginning. It says it's almost an F sharp. So let's tune it. So now when I play a C on the keyboard, it's actually a C. 1 octave higher. 2 octaves lower. 3 octaves lower. Okay, that's too low. 1 octave lower. This sounds like I could make something from it. Maybe I start with a delay. That always works. And the sustain all the way down, the decay a little bit up to 800 milliseconds, the release to 1 second. Perhaps with a longer attack time to create a bit of reversey sound. And perhaps cut more of the low end out, even though played an octave lower, but I'm still gonna cut a lot of the low end. So it could work as a texture more. So let's put in some notes to see if this can sound like something. Change the velocity of the notes as well. So yeah, this is not so conventional, but I think as a textural layer that sort of mimics the bass line or a synth line in the intro or a break where there's not a lot of other instruments, this could really add a little bit of extra to that synthesizer or piano or something like that. For those kind of purposes, this could work. But not necessarily as a main instrument. I'm going to group this together into an instrument rec and save it as Kazoo texture. That's it for this video. I used 3 different instruments to create 3 different sampled instruments. They're kind of quirky instruments, but as you can see, even with quirky instruments, you can create quite interesting sounds. If you're interested in sampled instruments, I have a sample pack over on Gumroad. It's linked in the description. It's 50 different instruments for Ableton, and it's a free download. Go check that out. Let me know if you have any questions, and see you in the next one.